I do not regret lots of things in life, but I do regret those times when I felt possessed by a sense of inferiority when around a certain person. The worst part is that I wasn't even aware of that feeling at a conscious level. My friend tried to tell me what was going on, but I was being very defensive about it, feeling almost offended by her remarks. Like, why would I feel inferior in front of someone? That's absolutely not the case. I know my worth. I realize now that I thought that I knew my worth, when in fact I was far from understanding who I truly am. But why did that happen? I guess the starting point was the fact that I was new in town. I felt alone. I felt like I didn't really have an identity anymore. The lack of identity was enhanced even by my employment status, which was unemployed. I was coming from a period of a so-called success, with a job where I had many colleagues around, I was being appreciated, and always with lots of things to do during the day. And all of a sudden I wake up to a completely different reality, that of an unemployed foreign girl in a new city and new country where I knew nobody. This happened basically when I moved from England to Florence exactly a year ago. I was spending my days indoors, applying for jobs, and I reached a stage where I completely identified myself with my work status. All my value being concentrated in that little superficial space. Unfortunately, we live in a society that places a huge accent on our work status. I don't know if you noticed, but the first thing that someone asks you when they first meet you is, "And what do you do for a living?" It's normal then to fall into the trap and start believing that I am what I do for a living. But is it that so? No wonder then that many people get into deep depression once they retire. They no longer have an official job, so they basically don't exist anymore. We often mistakenly put too much accent into a certain subpersonality. A subpersonality is a role that we play on a daily basis, or a mask that we wear. For example, the subpersonality of being a mother, a daughter, a wife, a husband, a friend, and goes up to the subpersonality of the warrior, the complainer, the victim, just to name a few. We all change subpersonality based on our current situations, and sometimes we tend to give too much importance to one in particular, so when we lose that role, we go in crisis. That's exactly what happened to me. I left my fancy job, so in my head I was left with nothing. During that time was when I met this fantastic person who I admired, and I still admire a lot, and while I was thinking in one way, my behavior was going in a different direction. I wasn't sure what was going on with me until months later, when I wasn't in contact with that person anymore. I could finally put the finger on it and admit to myself that I felt inferior when in the presence of that person. It wasn't only my lack of identity the problem there. It was also the fact that that person was coming from an important family and was doing pretty well financially. I know what you might be thinking now. I'll admit with my head down that I am not proud of the fact that I felt inferior to someone just because they had more material possessions than me. Even more if we consider the fact that I am by no means a person interested in a luxurious lifestyle. I consider myself a minimalist with great love for nature and a life as simple as possible. I guess my thinking was influenced by all the things that were going on at the time, the alienation feeling that was getting hold of me those days. That person had everything and I had nothing. I was worth nothing. Nothing from what I did in my life up to that stage could have made me change my mindset in that moment, even because I wasn't willing to admit my true beliefs. What I learned from that experience is to never place all my eggs in one basket, as they say in economics, to remember that I am not my job, I am not my wealth nor my looks, I am not my role in the society nor my status. I am much more than that. I am the love, the support, and the respect I give to others and to myself. I am the decency that my soul possesses. I am my good intentions. I am the genuine smile that I give to strangers while walking on the street. I am my desire for simple and happy life. I am the greatness that I see in others. I am the positivity that shines in my eyes and the hope with which I wake up every morning. By feeling inferior to others, we only promote inequality. I feel smaller than you. That means that you are bigger than me, so we are not equals. If we want to stop inequality, we need to start by abandoning any sense of inferiority we might feel. We blame inequality without realizing that we promoting it as well through our sense of inferiority. We need to stop comparing ourselves to others and only compare ourselves with whom we were yesterday until we reach a stage where we feel proud of the person we see in the mirror. And I am proud of myself, and I made a vow to never again appreciate myself through the eyes of my subpersonalities. I need to look at myself at a deeper and more meaningful level. I need to always remember who I truly am when I'm naked of all my subpersonalities, for example, during meditation. And last but not least, to respect my inner values and stay out of any kind of biases and preconceptions. If my society wants to value people based on their jobs, well, allow me not to play that game anymore. It's simply not for me. Thanks for watching.